Krishna, very dear devotees, welcome back again to our ongoing series on the glories of Sri Vrindavan Dham. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pashtaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nivishesha Shunyavadi Pastaja Deshatani. All glories to Srila Prabhupada, who is the revealer of the Dham. So we're again continuing with our series on Historic Vrindavan, and this will be part 7. In the olden days, life in Vrindavan was very different from today. Previously, Vrindavan's culture, traditions, clothing, lifestyle, worship, spiritual practices, cuisine, were all strictly according to Shastra. In Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Sri Rupa Goswami describes how any and all activities should be done for the pleasure of Krishna. That famous verse, Andabilasita Sunyam Gyanakarma Narvitam Anukulena Krishnano Shilanam Bhaktir Uttama. He writes, one should render transcendental service to the Supreme Lord Krishna favorably and without desire for material profit or gain through fruitive activities or philosophical speculation. That is called pure devotional service. So Anukulena Krishnanu Shilanam Bhaktir Uttama means activities which are favorable or pleasing to Krishna. Thus in Old Braj, and by this we mean we're talking about the last 300 or 400 years here, the way people dressed, their lifestyle, their language, their foodstuffs, their cuisine, everything was done with Krishna in mind. We're also trying to be like those Vrajavasis. We know that statement, always remember Krishna, never forget him. So they were so expert at doing that in all their activities. And even today, there's so many wonderful Vrajavasis like that. But there was something special about the past. And because that was so, we, aspiring devotees, we can gain a lot by hearing about the customs of the residents of Vrindavan in those times. We can follow in their footsteps. Actually, we can follow in the footsteps of the Vrajavasis in particular. In Upadeshamrita, Rupa Goswami writes in verse 8, the essence of all advice is that one should utilize one's full time, 24 hours a day, in nicely chanting and remembering the Lord's divine name, transcendental form, qualities, and eternal pastimes, thereby gradually engaging one's tongue and mind. In this way, one should reside in Braj and serve Krishna under the guidance of devotees. One should follow in the footsteps of the Lord's beloved devotees who are deeply attached to his devotional service. So therein, Rupa Goswami stresses we should follow in the footsteps of the Lord's beloved devotees, specifically those who live in Vrindavan. We want to be Vrajavasis. All glories to Vaikuntha, the official kingdom of God, but our hearts are in Braj, which is the playground of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. We must never forget that true Vrajavasis are very dear to Krishna. One often hears the following words of Krishna here in Braja. One time Krishna said, Vrajavasi bhalabasara mir jivana prasha. Inhe tanika na bisha riye mohe nanda baba ki anan. My Vrajavasa. Krishna announced in Vrindavan before leaving to Mathura, I take a vow in the presence of the king of Braja, Maharaj Nanda, that I will never forget my heart and soul, my dear Vrajavasis. Whoa. I take a vow in the presence of the king of Braja, Nanda Maharaj, that I will never forget my heart and soul, my dear Vrajavasis. The Lord's heart and soul is the Vrajavasis, because Amala Bhakti, they have the purest, selfless form of love for Krishna. So this is how much Krishna loves Vrajavasis. So, today I thought we could focus on one of the culture items that we were mentioning that people serve the Lord with in Old Braj, and that is the food, or the cuisine of Old Vrindavan. In our last lecture, we talked about, kantimala and japa beads and so many things in Old Braj. Let's talk about cuisine in Old Vrindavan. I'm always remembering Yamuna's cookbook, Yamuna Devi. What a great gift she gave to the Vaishnavas, now and in future generations, by compiling all those wonderful recipes that are part of our tradition of Krishna consciousness. All glories to Yamuna Devi. So let's talk about cuisine. What the Vrajavasis ate and what foodstuffs they offered to their deities in the temples. Interesting focus today. I picked food and drink as the focus today because there's a popular saying nowadays, isn't it? You are what you eat. But I found a similar statement in Braj Bhasa language. There's always a perfect counterpart here in Braj. Jaisa hoge ana, vaisha banega man. Jaisa payoge pani, vaisha hogi vani. Desires are affected by the food one takes, and the voice is affected by the water one drinks. The same thing, but more eloquently. Eloquence is truth spoken concisely. Yes, we are what we eat, but the Vrajavasis, they say desires are affected by the food one takes, and the voice is affected by the water one drinks. Vaishnava poetry. So to begin with, Shastra says that in Vrindavan, we know, one should only eat prasadam, food cooked and offered to the Lord. Actually, Krishna himself is very specific about this. There's 700 verses in Bhagavad Gita, and one verse in particular addresses this point that we should just eat prasadam. Chapter 3, verse 13. The devotees of the Lord are released from all kinds of sins because they eat food which is first offered in sacrifice. Others who prepare food for personal sense enjoyment verily eat only sin. Shri Bhagavad Prasadam ki. Lord Chaitanya's secret weapon. As for water, in the old days, Vrajavasis simply drank the pure water of the Yamuna River and from various lakes and streams. Previously there were something around 27 lakes just around Govardhan Hill. We sometimes think I'm going to go to the Sierra Nevada mountains or the Rocky Mountains in America and go high into the mountains and drink from the lakes and the streams. We just have that desire, pure. So water was also pure. Well, it still is in Vrindavan in a transcendental sense, but in those days it was pure, pure, pure and transcendental. So when you're hungry, you stop and you take some water from a kund or a stream or Yamuna River. And as for foodstuffs, the Vrajavasis ate, but first offered to the Lord. The foodstuffs, one foodstuff in particular, they liked because Krishna liked it, was buttermilk. Krishna loves buttermilk. He loves milk sweets. A great Vaishnav, actually a great Braj Bhasa poet of the early 15th century, Pramananda Das, he writes, Aj dhadi kanchan mo bai, ja dhadi ko brahmadik ichat so gopin bhanti daihi. Quote, long one this one. Look, today the buttermilk made from yogurt by the gopis has become the rarest thing to achieve, even by the creator of this world, Lord Brahma. Just see, the humble gopis are distributing that buttermilk to everyone, It is that very Adhara Amrita, which is the nectar of Krishna's lotus lips. Then he goes on. That Lord of the 14 worlds, while ruling in Dwarka, eats 56 sumptuous food items, 36 special types of dishes, 108 types of different drinks, and many types of snacks. He writes, and many types of snacks. Yet that same Lord hankers for drinking a handful of buttermilk prepared by the Vrajagopis of Braj. Just a handful. He wants it from the Vrajagopis, buttermilk. The role of buttermilk is nicely described by the poet Rasa Khan. Remember we spoke about him. He was a Muslim who became a pure Vaishnava, Rasa Khan. So the role of buttermilk is nicely described in one of his poems. He writes, the glories of Sri Krishna are sung unceasingly by Lord Anantashesha, Lord Ganesh, Lord Shiva, the sun god, and Indra. The Vedas declare him as beginningless, endless, unlimited, indestructible, and void of differences. And great sages like Narada, Shukadev, and Vyas have accepted their defeat while singing his glories. They can never fathom his glories. Yet, Sri Rasa Khan says that the power of the love of the maidens of Braj is such that make Krishna dance for a sip of buttermilk from the palms of their hands. All the gopis ki. Buttermilk ki. Krishna loves buttermilk. Of course, Krishna eats more than buttermilk in Braj. We've discussed in previous lectures how devotees in Vrindavan offer him chapan bhog, or 56 types of food items to Krishna during various big festivals. Whenever there's a big festival here, an important festival, you'll always see, you go to the temples and you'll see the altars are full of different varieties of foodstuffs, specifically 56 food items. So he eats more than buttermilk. And in my research, I found a very interesting history behind the origin of these 56 type of food offerings, chapan bhog, on festivals. And that is, when Indra flooded, he was a rascal, he flooded the whole of Vrindavan with water, and Krishna had lifted Govardhan Hill to save the Vrajavasis. Mother Yasoda was just fretting. She was worried that Krishna wasn't eating because he was standing and he was holding the hill up with his hand, with his finger. So she decided to feed him. And she fed him every prahara of the day. So what's a prahara? A prahara lasts for 3 hours. So there are 8 praharas in 24 hours in one day. So because Krishna held Govardhan Hill for 7 days, that means she cooked 56 foodstuffs and offered them to Krishna in those 7 days. 7 days times 8 praharas a day equals 56. 56 praharas. So each prahara she cooked a special preparation. So 56 chapan bhog in that mood is offered to Krishna. Isn't that interesting? On festival days. Now, a little more research revealed that the meaning of chapan, 56 bhogas or offerings, is that, this is really interesting, during the Rasa Leela dance, the Vrajagopis arrange themselves in 3 circles around Radha and Krishna. Radha and Krishna are in the middle, and there's one circle of gopis, and then there's a wider circle of gopis, and there's yet another circle of gopis in this one particular Rasa Leela dance. And it looked like the firmament of a lotus. The lotus is there with different petals coming out, extending like that. So it's compared to a lotus. So the first layer of the lotus, first circle, had it's described as 8 petals, representing the 8 main gopis. The second layer of this lotus in the rasa dance had 16 petals, representing the 16 secondary gopis. The third layer, the ring of the lotus, had 32 petals, representing the 32 gopis in that circle. And at one point, in this particular Rasa Leela dance, all these gopis started offering bhoga that they had cooked to Krishna. And the total number of the offerings came to 56. Why? Because there's 8 gopis in the first circle, 16 in the next, plus 32. You do the math, 56. So Chapambok, there's different explanations why in Vrindavan we have this tradition of offering 56 preparations to Krishna, spread out on the altar on special days. It's really beautiful at Radharaman Temple. I've gone. So beautiful. And they distribute it to all the devotees. Shri Brajabhumi Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki. So, in conclusion, Krishna does love buttermilk, but he's also adept at eating 56 preparations on special festival days. So now, let's discuss some of the traditional foodstuffs that Vrajavasis themselves cooked and offered to Krishna and then respected in days gone by. I was reading in the Institute that in the 14th and 15th centuries, the food was very simple in Braj, obviously reflecting the simple lifestyle of people who lived there in those days, you can just imagine. Most of the residents of Braj in those times were farmers. They worked very hard, 12 hours a day, and they needed a food which was full of nutrients and proteins and carbohydrates. Therefore, historians say that was when the famous dish of Braj, the roti, was created. We know the roti because we try to follow in the footsteps of the Vrajavasis. Sometimes we go out with my friends and we do madhukari in the villages. It means you're allowed, a renunciate's allowed to go to 4 houses for his sustenance for the whole day, and whatever they give you at during those visits of 4 houses, that's what you eat. But Vrajavasis love to feed the sadhus, so sometimes you get full at the first house. But what we often get is a roti. A roti with some pickles, some achar, a little sabji, some dahi, some yogurt. Ah, what a meal. You feel completely satisfied just by the nature of those ingredients and the fact that a Vrajavasi are giving it to you with love and devotion. So this is when it manifested. It manifested at that time, the famous roti of Braj. Rotis, you could say, are like thick chapatis made with milk and ghee. Makkan roti hath mein lino gayan ke rakware. Mirabai, the famous singer, she wrote one time that during their lunches 5,000 years ago, Krishna and the cowherd boys, they ate such rotis with creamy butter in their hands. She has a song like that. They ate rotis with creamy butter in their hands. You don't need to be satisfied by going into a huge supermarket and shopping in all directions and putting, no, in Vrindavan, roti, achar, dahi, sabji, offered to Krishna. Eat it if you please. There's that song in ISKCON. Eat it if you please. So again, the Vrajavasis, they also ate achar, like pickles, made from mangoes and lemons and so forth and so on. They would take that with the roti. Little spice, little punch to it. Actually, I was reading one poet. He wrote that such spicy pickle preparations, when mixed with the roti and touching the tip of the tongue, manifest an ocean of rasa in one's mouth. Taste, literally. Such spicy pickle preparations, when mixed with the roti and touching the tip of one's tongue, manifest an ocean of rasa within one's mouth. Now, if it's a little difficult for you to comprehend because it's just a few ingredients, you have to come to Braj and go on Madhukari. You know, when they invite you into their home, you sit down, they have an open fire, the cow dung fire, they're cooking, the ladies are so expert. They make that roti, whoom, they throw it, bang, it lands on your plate. One of the children come, they put some little sabji there, and then there's some dahi, some achar. It's all offered. You know, the first one's offered, they keep making, they throw that roti, whoa, steaming hot. Maharaj, prasad. I love it. We love Braj. This is our home. So in Krishna Bhavanamrita, chapter 6, verses 52 to 58, one of our great heroes, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, writes, so interesting, that the first meal of the day, the breakfast meal, should always be accompanied with a little humor. And he gives the example of Krishna and Madhu Mangal. We've many times mentioned Madhu Mangal. He's Krishna's funny Brahmin cowherd boyfriend who just loves to eat unlimited sweets. He's not embarrassed with his bulging belly. Not at all. He displays it very proudly. So Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur writes that one day during breakfast, Krishna said to Madhu Mangal, Madhu, have you studied all the rasa shastras? Because he's a brahmana. Madhu, have you studied all the rasa shastras? You know, the shastras about deep loving attachment to Krishna. And the different mellows that one tastes in serving Krishna through these different rasas. So Madhu Mangal replied, oh yes, I have, Krishna. Rasa Shastras described 8 rasas, headed by the rasa of loving Krishna as a maidservant. Krishna was impressed. Then Madhu Mangal, with a coy little smile, he said, however, in my opinion, there are only 6 actual rasas, which are experienced when tasting the form, softness, fragrance, sweetness, melodiousness, and the emotion of joy when eating prasadam. Madhu Mangal ki. Isn't that cute? And we laugh, there's some humor, but there's a lesson to be learned. In Madhu Mangal's words, for when we respect prasadam, Prabhupada always emphasized, we don't just eat on the run. No, we sit and we respect prasadam as the mercy of the Lord. Prabhupada would always use this word, respect. When we respect prasadam, we can, in the words of Madhu Mangal, admire the attractive form of the food, touch its softness, smell its wonderful fragrance, taste its sweetness, hear its nice sound while munching. You know, there's a crack, snapple and pop, you know, when you take some foodstuffs, and mentally feel ecstatic joy from eating. Think about that. We can admire the attractive form of the food, we can touch its softness, we can smell its wonderful fragrance, we can taste its sweetness, we can hear its nice sound while we're munching it, and we can mentally feel ecstatic joy from eating. This is a good lesson we've learned from Madhu Mangal, and we should take it to heart. What we hear in these lectures, when we hear in the lectures of the Vaishnavas in our ISKCON society, what we hear from Prabhupada, we are meant to take it from heart and act on it. Paripashana sevaya, that famous verse in Bhagavad Gita, accepting a spiritual master, we hear from him, and then sevaya, we serve those instructions. So the spiritual master is very happy when he sees us taking Bhagavat Prasadam, not just because it's nourishing the body. Yes, Prabhupada often replied his letters, or concluded his letters, he would say, may this meet you in the best of health. Your ever will wisher, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. So healthy, yes, but the pure health of going back home to the spiritual world, where there's no birth, disease, old age, and death. Part of that journey is fulfilled by taking prasadam. Now, while prasadam was simple in the olden days in Braj, rotis, chickpeas, sabjis, some fruits, with the arrival of Lord Chaitanya and our 6 Goswamis, as well as acharyas of various Vaishnava sampradayas, the art of cooking in Braj blossomed. How so? With the introduction of deity worship. Remember? Mahaprabhu asked the 6 Goswamis to come here to write books on the science of Krishna consciousness, discover the lost places of Krishna's pastimes, and establish temples with deities and deity worship. So for themselves, as time went on, the Vrajavasis, they were content to eat simply, but for Krishna, they went all out in developing many tasty preparations, which are standard here now in Braj. This, you could say, I could say in my research, was particularly due to Gomata. Namo Brahmanya Devaya, Go Brahmanya Hitaya Cha, Jagaritaya Krishnaya, Govindaya, Namo Namo. 2 things are very dear to Krishna: cows and Brahmins. Brahmins because they continue preaching the message of Krishna when he goes back to the spiritual world, and cows because Krishna loves cows. In the spiritual world, he doesn't go to the forest with an army of Brahmanas. He goes with cows. He's a cowboy, Krishna. So when the deities came, when the deities started manifesting, the deities of the Goswamis, and then other Goswamis, and then kings and queens and their Havelis, as we've been describing the last month or so. Dairy products formed a very important part of the cuisine of Braj. Many foodstuffs manifested: paneer, cheese, ghee, burfi, sandesh, rasmalai. Actually, one of the most famous sweets in Braj to this very day is peda, P-E-D-A. It's a kind of sweet milk laddu, you could say, which was and is prepared with natural sugar, gur, and a little cardamom powder. Nowadays, the peda of Mathura is famous all over India. Now, to go on, isn't this interesting? I was also reading that in the olden days, the spice boxes, because in those days the ladies, they didn't have plastic or glass containers. In the olden days, the spice boxes of the Vrajavasi housewives were described as storehouses of Ayurvedic medicine. What does that mean? They mixed in the medicine into the spices? No. Shastra says these herbs, these spices themselves were Ayurvedic medicine. It's a natural medicine. Thus there was very less disease in those days and less need for doctors. Vrajavasi life is perfect life. The fact that these spices, these herbs, have an Ayurvedic propensity, a curing propensity, is made very clear in another one of the 700 verses of Bhagavad Gita. Krishna is speaking, profound truth there. But he takes the time to mention the healing herb. I think I'm correct, 9:16. Krishna says, "But it is I who am the ritual, I, the sacrifice, the offering to the ancestors, the healing herb. The healing herb. I am the healing herb and the transcendental chant. I am the butter and the fire and the offering." Ayurvedic medicine. So, the spices they use to cook, just by eating, you're getting freed from any illness. Wow. Perfect culture. Now, regarding water, because there were various types of drinks and they required water, again, the source of water was always the Jamuna River, as well as, lakes and sweet water wells. Of course, we'll hear in a few minutes that a lot of the water in Vrindavan is not sweet water, it's salty, but there's a transcendental reason for that. Now, the daily routine of the household women in Braj was to go with these very big clay pots on their heads to such water sources and fill the pots for water and for cooking. But like I was saying, it wasn't always easy. You had to find sweet water because, why? Much of the underground water in Vrindavan is salty. I know now when I take a shower, I have a bar of soap that really makes lots of suds, lots of soap suds. When I'm in the West, when I bring it to Vrindavan with the water here, I rub it and I get one bubble of soap suds, 2 bubbles, because the water is very salty. So how is that? How is that? Well, that can be explained in the following pastime. It is written that after Krishna left Vrindavan, he sent Uddhava, Sri Uddhava, another one of our heroes, with messages back to Vrindavan for his friends and his parents and his lovers, and so many letters. So upon arriving, Uddhava, who was carrying these letters, he just got to Braj. He was a Dwarkavasi. He had experienced Vrindavan. So when he got here, he asked one gopi, can you give me the address, or can you direct me to Nanda Maharaj and Yashoda's home, because I have a letter from Krishna for them. So that gopi replied, this is very interesting, very subtle, very rasic. She replied, my dear Uddhava, follow this river, and where it ends, that will be the home of Mother Yashoda. Follow this river, and where it ends, that will be the home of Mother Yashoda. So it was a flowing river. It wasn't difficult to follow a flowing river throughout the land, watering the land. He followed that river, and when he came to the home of Nanda Maharaj and Yashoda, he was stunned. Why was he stunned? Because he saw the source of that river with the tears of separation from Krishna falling from the eyes of Nanda and Yashoda, and actually all the gopis, gopas, cows, peacocks, deers, parrots of Vrindavan. All there crying in Vipralamba Bhav. Those tears formed a river that was flowing throughout Braj. Now, those type of tears are salty, and it's because of those salty tears that all the underground water sources in Vrindavan are mostly salty. So when I'm trying to set up, with the soap, I'm not worrying, I'm not getting this lather. I'm thinking, the tears of the gopis. Let me never leave Vrindavan. Hare Krishna. So now, regarding cooking for the deities in Vrindavan, most of the dishes and recipes in old Vrindavan, and even today in many temples, this is really interesting, come from Jagannath Puri. The spices, the way of cooking, the style of the pots and utensils, the names of the dishes and how to serve them, all came from Jagannath Puri's big kitchen. There's a big kitchen in Jagannath Puri because they are offering him 56 offerings a day. Big kitchen, huge kitchen. So what we have here in Vrindavan today as far as cooking for the deities, this all came from Jagannath Puri's big kitchen. How so? It started when Lord Chaitanya sent his servant Kashishwara, who was a priest and a cook in Lord Jagannath's temple, to assist Rupa Goswami in his new service to Govinda Dev. You may remember we gave a full lecture on that. How Rupa Goswami found Govindaji, how he established his worship in the forest of Braj. Even before there was a big temple, there was some simple hut he was worshipped in. But very simply, the Goswamis, they had their mission. Besides deity worship, they had to write books. They had to go out and find all the lost holy places. So Rupa Goswami wrote to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and said, could you send some servant to help me? So Mahaprabhu sent Kashishwara. He was a devoted follower, a disciple, Mahaprabhu. He worked in the temple. So he sent him along with the deity, remember, for to worship, because I'm leaving you, Mahaprabhu. So Mahaprabhu gave him a deity that he could worship when he was doing the worship for Govinda Dev in Vrindavan. So it was this Kashishwara who, having spent so much time in the Puri temple, he introduced those kitchen standards in the kitchen of Govindaji. And because Govindaji's temple was the headquarters in Vrindavan for all Gaudiya Vaishnavas, and you could say the example for temple standards for all the temples coming up in Vrindavan. Eventually, the pujaris and the cooks and all these other temples in Vrindavan cooked the same way. For Radharaman, Gopinath, Madan Mohan, and other deities. And the priests and pujaris continue to do so in most temples in Braj today, the same standard that was there in Jagannath Puri. So it has a certain history, but it also has a certain, you could say, standard, that prasadam served to the deities in Vrindavan. It has to consist of 6 different tastes. We're going into nectarian details here. The cuisine, the food offered to Vrindavan's deities, and you may want to write this down because you are serving your deities all over the world in the same mood as the Vrajavasis. Prabhupada was a Vrajavasi. He is eternally a Vrajavasi. It's made very clear by the poems he wrote on the Jaladuta going to America. So we serve our deities in that way. Radha and Krishna are served in Braj. So here's something that you can write down. What are the different tastes which you want to offer to your deities? 6 different tastes. The taste of the foods, they have to be sweet, salty, pungent, which translates into spicy, bitter, there have to be some bitter preparations, sour, and astringent. Now, a plate devoid of any of these tastes is considered as an incomplete meal for the Lord and his devotees here in Braj. Moreover, according to the Guru Vastakam, verse 4, food prepared should be also considered of 4 types. But we're getting the detail here. We talk about sweet, salted, pungent, bitter, sour, and astringent. But here's another guideline. Food prepared for the deities must be of 4 particular types. Bhaksha, which means food which is first ground by the teeth and then gulped down. It means you don't drink it like maybe a soup, but you have to chew on it. Bhaksha, that has to be there. For example, like rotis or any type of bread in general. There has to be bhojya, food which is directly gulped down without chewing, like yogurt. Kosya, which means food with the sucked, meaning juices and curries, etc. And leya, food which is licked, like chutneys. You lick up the chutney. This is mentioned in the Guru Vastakam, verse 4. So these 4 types of food, full of 6 flavors that we mentioned, are always being prepared for the Lord of Vrindavan. An interesting note is that vegetables that grow under the ground, like potatoes, radishes, and carrots, are not used for cooking for Vrindavan deities, like I've seen in Puri. Jackfruit is also forbidden, as well as any new Western-style food, pizza, spaghetti, vegetarian burgers, no way. They can be offered in your home, if you offer them with love and devotion. but not strictly in Braj temples. Actually, even wild rice, wild vegetables, and wild fruits are not allowed for cooking for the deities. Only vegetables, wheat, rice, and fruits that are grown in the gardens here, the deities' gardens, because the kings in yore have established big gardens for the service of the deities in the temples. Only vegetables, wheat, rice, fruits, flowers grown expressly for the deities are used here in Braj. Wow. These dishes and recipes are used for deities like Radha Ballabha, Radharaman, Govindaji, Gopinath, Madan Mohan, Munki Bihari Lal, Gokulanandaji, Srinath Ji, and Nathwar, and a few others. Same tradition still goes on as in ancient times. And as we all know from our training from Srila Prabhupada, such food must be cooked and served in a particular consciousness. This is the art. It must be cooked and served in a proper consciousness. And there's a very nice incident that I was reading about in the late 15th century to illustrate this. When one is cooking, what is his consciousness? One time the Acharya of the Radha Ballabha Sampradaya, his name was Hita Harivamsa. He's the Acharya of the Radha Ballabha Sampradaya. He was cooking khichdi for his beloved Radha Ballabha deity. And suddenly, a scholar came to debate with him. But because Hita Harivamsa was cooking for his Lord, he didn't reply. He didn't utter a single word to the scholar. The entire time he was focused on cooking. So the scholar became very frustrated, and he said, why are you not debating with me? So Harivamsa, after completing the cooking for his beloved Lord, he turned to that scholar. He said something very profound. He said, sir, if I see you, hear you, reply to you, or in any way debate with you during my cooking, my consciousness will affect the bhoga offering to my Lord. Thus the taste, the mood, and the flavors of that food will not come out as they should be. Therefore, while cooking food for the Lord, one should never entertain his or her senses in any activity other than chanting the Lord's holy name and thinking about his pleasure. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama. Krishna, I hope you like this spice. Like Mother Yasoda, she's always singing, glorifying Krishna while she's cooking. We want to be Vrajavasis. Practice makes perfect. Let us not procrastinate. Procrastinate means putting off for tomorrow something that should be done today. Now is the time to imbibe according to time, place, and circumstance. I could say, although I would like to follow all these things strictly and from within my heart for my deities, but we're getting a glimpse of what it means to be a Vrajavasi, who Rupa Goswami said in the very beginning, we should follow a Vrajavasi's mood, Prabhupada's mood. So after hearing that answer, the pride of that scholar vanished, and he bowed down and grabbed the lotus feet of Hita Harivamsa's lotus feet. Now the actual mood behind cooking and serving food for deities in the Vrindavan temples is, it's very well known, that the head cooks are just assisting. They're the head cooks, but they're in the mood of assisting. So what? The question may be raised, if they're head cooks, who are they assisting? You've got the head cook, you do that, you do that. But no, the head cook is thinking, I'm assisting. It's a type of meditation. What is their meditation? This is the meditation for cooking for Krishna in Braj. That Shri Radhika herself is cooking the meal. And Vrinda Devi will take it and serve it along with all the sakis to Krishna. So this was and is the mood in meditation. When cooks cook for Radha and Krishna in Vrindavan temples, they're thinking, I'm just assisting Shri Radha and her maidservants. Always remember Krishna and never forget him. Here's the quote-unquote technique, which should become spontaneous. But practice makes perfect. Yes, we're all works in progress, but these things we should know. Prabhupada said one time, we should know his books like a lawyer knows the law book, his law books. So in the same way, we should know Braj and the residents of Braj and how they serve Krishna, and who is Krishna. This is our goal. We have to, these things, I could say these classes are very important. I'm not important, but I'm just sharing all this nectarian knowledge, and we can all imbibe it in our hearts, because Prabhupada said that Krishna consciousness is something that we imbibe within our hearts, from the sadhus, from the shastras, from our visits to the Dham, from our worshipping our deities. It's all imbibed. So let us remember all these things. These pujaris are just assisting Radha and her maidservants. And we are allowed to think like that because, well, again, Rupa Goswami said in the very beginning of this lecture that we should follow in the footsteps of the residents of Vrindavan. Specifically for us, that means Srila Prabhupada, and he has introduced all these principles according to time, place, and circumstance in the Western countries. So let us just do everything the way Srila Prabhupada did it. And if we can embellish it a little bit with some of these hints from old India, all the better. So in conclusion, we can see how important cuisine was in Braj culture, both in the lives of the Vrajavasis and in the service of their deities. I was reading that in Braj culture, it is said that seva, service, it is said that seva has to have three things in order to be complete. Now we're all servants. Jivera Supoya Krishnara Nityadas. We're learning to be servants. One time I told you, a devotee said to Prabhupada, Prabhupada, you're the greatest Vaishnava. Prabhupada in his humility just bowed his head. He said, I'm just trying to become a Vaishnava. A Vaishnava is a very special thing. So we're trying, and Vaishnava means servant of Krishna. So in Braj culture, it is said that seva has to have three things in order to be complete. Raga, bhoga, and shringara. Raga, bhoga, and shringara. Raga means that, we're talking about practical service here. Raga means singing different melodies of the Lord, like when, singing during your service. Bhoga means cooking and offering foodstuffs to the Lord, and shringara means decorating or adorning the Lord. You could say this specifically refers to deity worship because, again, Mother Yasoda's when she's cooking, she's singing, the cooking's there, and then we decorate the deities. So rag, bhog, and shringara. For it to be complete, there has to be singing, there has to be cooking, and decorating the Lord. One without the other two will be incomplete. Thus the seva in Vrindavan is complete when all these three things are done. Therefore, one of those things was food, that was cuisine, and as we've tried to explain as best as we can possibly do, this food, this cuisine is such an important part of historic Vrindavan. Hare Krishna. So, in conclusion, I would like to quote a verse, one of my favorite verses, from one of my favorite devotees of all time, Sri Rupa Goswami Prabhupada, in his immortal Padyavali. He writes about cuisine. He says, O Lord Hari, you greatly enjoyed the sweet rice presented by Shyamala, the panita, the sweet named Surat feni presented by Kamala, the ladus given by Bhadra, and the sugarcane juice offered by Chandravali. I hope that the delicious food I have prepared under Radharani's guidance, and I now place before you, you will enjoy 100 times more than what was offered by these other gopis. Hare Krishna. Isn't that beautiful? Also, we'll do a final conclusion here with a beautiful poem by Surdas. We've quoted him so many times, haven't we? That poet. What is it? What do they say? What is the use of an arrow unless it can pierce the heart? Kshatriya. What is the use of an arrow unless it can pierce the heart? What is the use of poetry unless it can melt the heart? So that's Surdas. So let's conclude with some of his poetry about cuisine in Braj. He writes, "O maiden of Braj, please mercifully feed me with the remnants of Krishna's food, even if it has fallen to the ground. When the tasty sabji and chapatis touch my tongue, rasa starts dancing in my mouth in 6 various forms, like we spoke earlier, the 6 tastes, sweet, salty, etc. The sweet curd and ghee give the power to continue my service. What else can Surdas say? The prasad of the Lord is the only maintenance of my life." Hare Krishna. Lord Chaitanya's secret weapon, Bhagavat Prasadam. Let us take it with respect, and let us be very, very merciful to the fallen conditioned souls of Kali Yuga, and spread that prasadam far and wide. Thank you. Another lecture about historic Vrindavan. We will continue with another lecture next Friday. I again apologize, we cut out Tuesdays, but there's going to be a lot to do this summer. But we didn't want to miss out on Braj. We wanted to remember Braj, so yes, these lectures. Thank you, Prabhus. See you next Friday. All glories to Srila Prabhupada, the revealer of the Dham. Shri Shri Gaur Nitai ki, Shri Shri Krishna Balaram ki, Shri Shri Radha Shama Sundar ki, Vrindavaneshwari Shrimati Radharani ki, Mayapur Dham ki, Shri Shri Gaur Nitai ki, Shri Bhagavat Prasadam ki, Prasadam distribution ki, back to Godhead ki, Thai Gaur Pimanandi, Jai Jai Sri Sri Radhe Shyam.